The planet burned below. Aaron watched through the observation window as another city vanished in a flash of white light. The Krevith bombardment had been going on for 3 days now. 3 days of watching his people die while he could do nothing to stop it. The council chamber felt too quiet, too empty. Half the seats sat vacant because those councilors were already dead. "How many ships do we have left?" Aaron asked without turning around. Lisa checked her data pad. Her hands shook slightly. 17 defense cruisers, maybe 40 smaller patrol craft. The Krevith have over 300 warships in orbit now. 17 against 300. The math was simple and cruel. The Dalthine had never been warriors. They were traders, scientists, artists. Their ships were built to explore and protect merchant convoys, not fight a real war. The Krevith were the opposite. They had spent centuries conquering their way across the galaxy. The evacuation transports? Aaron finally turned to face his chief scientist. The last one left an hour ago. "We got about 40,000 people off-world before the Krevith closed the blockade." Lisa's voice broke slightly. "That leaves 12 million still down there. 12 million people who would die because Aaron had failed them. He had tried diplomacy. He had tried surrender negotiations. The Krevith had laughed at both. They didn't want territory or resources. They wanted to prove they could crush anyone who stood in their way. An explosion rocked the station. The lights flickered for a moment before the backup systems kicked in. Another defense cruiser gone. Another 200 Dalthine dead. "Commander Drexen is hailing us again," one of the communication officers said quietly. Aaron straightened his back. "Put him through." The view screen changed to show a Krevith officer. Drexen was typical of his species. Heavy scales, 4 eyes, a mouth full of sharp teeth designed for tearing meat. He looked pleased with himself. "Counselor Aaron, ready to discuss your unconditional surrender yet? You know we have nothing to surrender with." "You've already won." Drexen's smile widened. "I know, but I want to hear you say it. I want the Great Dalthine Republic to admit they were weak. That they never should have refused to join our dominion when we gave you the chance. We refused because we saw what you did to the others. You don't want allies. You want slaves, subjects, citizens. The words don't matter. What matters is that you lose and we win. Always." Drexen leaned forward. "Your last defense fleet will be destroyed within the hour. Then we will land troops and take your cities one by one. I'm told Dalthine are quite fragile. My soldiers are looking forward to testing that." Aaron forced himself to stay calm. "There are laws. The Galactic Council has rules about treatment of civilians. The Galactic Council is 3 months away and too cowardly to interfere with a Dominion internal affair. By the time they finish debating, your species will be a footnote in history." Drexen cut the transmission. Silence filled the council chamber. Aaron could feel the weight of every eye on him. They were waiting for him to say something, to do something, to somehow save them all. But he had nothing left, Counselor. Lisa stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "There is one option. One thing we haven't tried." "What option?" "We've done everything." The ancient beacon. Aaron felt his blood turn cold. The ancient beacon was a relic from before the Dalthine had even achieved spaceflight. It sat in a chamber 3 levels below them, a massive structure of technology that nobody understood. According to legend, it was left behind by the Old Ones, the first civilization to achieve faster than light travel. They had vanished 10,000 years ago. "The beacon hasn't been activated in recorded history," Aaron said carefully. "We don't even know if it still works. The archive files say it's a universal distress signal, that it broadcasts across all of known space in every language." "To who?" "The Old Ones are gone. Everyone knows that." Lisa pulled up a holographic display. Ancient text floated in the air between them. "I've been studying the old records. There's a reference here to those who sleep in the dark places and the guardians from the world of death. The Old Ones believed that somewhere out there, someone would answer. That's mythology, stories to comfort children. Maybe. But what do we have to lose?" Lisa met his eyes. "We're dead already, Aaron, all of us. At least this way we die knowing we tried everything." Another explosion shook the station. Closer this time. The Krevith were tightening their noose. Aaron made his decision. Activate the beacon. They moved quickly through the empty corridors. Most of the station's population had evacuated or moved to the shelters. The beacon chamber was exactly as Aaron remembered from school field trips a lifetime ago. A massive crystalline structure in the center of a circular room. Lights pulsed slowly through it like a heartbeat. Lisa went to the control panel. Her fingers danced across buttons that hadn't been touched in millennia. The beacon began to hum. The sound was low and deep, felt more than heard. How do we know it's working? Aaron asked. We don't. The instructions say it activates automatically once powered up. It will broadcast until someone answers or until power runs out. How long will that take? Based on the energy readings? About 3 years. 3 years of screaming into the void. 3 years of hoping someone, somewhere would hear them. Aaron wondered if they would even survive 3 more hours. The view screen in the chamber automatically switched to show the space battle. The last Dalthene defense cruisers were fighting desperately, but they were losing. One by one, they died. Aaron stood next to Lisa and watched. There was nothing else to do. The beacon pulsed behind them, sending its message out into the darkness. Somewhere in the galaxy, in the deep places between stars, something heard, and far away, on a small blue world that the galaxy had tried to forget, alarms began to sound. Admiral Helen Cross hated waiting. She sat in her office at United Earth Defense Command headquarters, reviewing supply reports that should have been handled by someone 3 ranks below her. But there wasn't much else to do these days. Earth's fleet spent most of their time on patrol around their own solar system, watching an empty frontier that nobody wanted to cross. The Galactic Council had made that very clear 200 years ago, when humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel. Earth was welcomed to the galactic community with open arms and then immediately quarantined. The official reason was cultural adjustment period. The real reason was that humanity scared the hell out of every other species they met. Helen's desk computer chimed, a priority alert from the Deep Space Monitoring Station on Pluto. Admiral Cross were picking up something unusual, a signal, broadcasting across all frequencies in hundreds of languages, including English. Helen sat up straighter. What kind of signal? A distress call, ma'am. Very old technology, but very powerful. It's coming from the outer spiral arm, about 800 light-years from here. The translation algorithm says it's from someone called the Dalthene Republic. They're under attack and requesting immediate assistance from anyone who can hear them. Have we heard from them before? No, ma'am. The Dalthene aren't in our contact database. According to the galactic charts, their territory is on the other side of Council space. We've never had permission to travel that far. Helen felt something stir in her chest, something that had been sleeping for too long. Get me President Garcia on the line, and start pulling up everything we have on that region. 20 minutes later, Helen stood in the Situation Room with the President and half the Joint Chiefs. The distress signal played on the speakers. It was translated into English by the ship's computer, but Helen could hear the desperation in the original voice. This is Counselor Aaron of the Dalthene Republic. Our worlds are under attack by the Krevath Dominion. Our defenses have failed. Millions of civilians are dying. We are broadcasting this message in the hope that someone, anyone, will hear us. Please, if there is anyone out there who values peace and justice, we beg you to help us. We cannot hold much longer, the message repeated, over and over, a voice crying out into the dark. The Krevath Dominion, one of the intelligence officers said. We've heard of them. They're a major military power. Conquered about 40 star systems in the last century. The Galactic Council considers them aggressive but stays out of their way. President Garcia looked at Helen. Can we reach them in time to matter? If we leave now with our fastest ships, we can be there in 72 hours. But ma'am, the Council won't like this. We're not supposed to leave our quarantine zone without permission. Do we need permission to answer a distress call?
Legally?
No. There's an old galactic law that says any species capable of rendering aid must respond to legitimate emergency signals, but we've never invoked it before. Garcia turned to look at the star map showing the Dalthene territory. So far away, so far from anyone who cared enough to help. How many ships can we send? Helen had been hoping for that question. She had been waiting for it for years. I can have 6 battle fleets ready to launch in 4 hours, 36 heavy cruisers, 72 destroyers, and about 200 support craft, plus the Ragnarok. Everyone in the room knew about the Ragnarok, the experimental dreadnought that humanity had built in secret, using technology that the Council said was too dangerous. It was bigger than anything else in Earth's fleet and carried weapons that would make the civilized galaxy uncomfortable. Do it, Garcia said. All of it. Send them everything we've got, Helen smiled. Yes, ma'am. 4 hours later, Helen stood on the command deck of her flagship, the UES Valiant. Through the viewport, she could see the rest of the fleet assembling. Ship after ship, moving into formation with the precision of years of training. They might not have fought a real war in 2 centuries, but humanity had never stopped preparing for one. Captain Dan Reed walked onto the bridge. He was young for a ship commander, only 35, but he had proven himself in countless simulations and training exercises. More importantly, he was one of the few officers who actually believed in what the fleet was supposed to stand for. Admiral, all ships report ready for departure. Good. Send a message to the Dalthine. Tell them help is coming. Then get us moving. The fleet entered faster than light travel in a cascade of blue light. Behind them, Earth spun silently in the void. Ahead of them was the unknown. 3 hours into the journey, Helen's communication officer received an urgent transmission from the Galactic Council headquarters. Ambassador Thesson, the Council representative assigned to monitor Earth, appeared on the screen. He was a Velen, a species that looked something like a tall, thin bird with 4 arms. He was clearly upset. Admiral Cross, we have detected your fleet's departure. You must turn back immediately. We're responding to a legitimate distress signal, Ambassador. Galactic law requires it. You don't understand. The Dalthine situation is a Dominion internal matter. The Kravath have claimed those worlds as part of their expansion. The Council has decided not to interfere. Then it's a good thing we're not part of the Council's decision. Admiral, please listen to me. Thesson's feathers were standing on end, a sign of extreme agitation. Your species has been isolated because you're from a death world. Do you understand what that means? Your planet has gravity nearly twice that of standard. Your weather systems are violent. Your native predators would be considered weapons of war on most worlds. You evolved to survive in an environment that would kill most galactic species in days. I'm aware of Earth's classification. Then you must know that when you emerge in Dalthine space, you will terrify them. When you engage the Kravath, you will shock them. Humanity fights in ways that the rest of the galaxy finds disturbing. You use kinetic weapons, explosives, tactics based on endurance and pain tolerance that other species cannot match. The Council kept you in quarantine not because we think you're evil, but because we don't know how to integrate a warrior species that doesn't follow our rules. Helen felt her anger rising. So you'd rather let millions of innocent people die than risk us offending anyone's sensibilities? I'm trying to warn you that once you do this, there's no going back. The galaxy will see what humanity is capable of, and they will judge you for it. Let them judge. We're going anyway. Thesson closed his eyes. Then I will pray that the Dalthine survive what's coming. And I will pray that the rest of us can survive knowing that the humans are no longer contained. The transmission ended. Dan looked at Helen. Do you think he's right? That will scare people? Probably. But someone is dying out there and asking for help. That's all that matters. Helen turned back to the viewport. Besides, maybe it's time the galaxy learned something about humanity. We might be from a death world, but that doesn't make us monsters. It just makes us really good at protecting the things we care about. The fleet traveled on through the dark, 72 hours to reach a people they had never met. 72 hours to prove that Earth's quarantine had been wrong. 72 hours until the galaxy learned what happened when you disturbed the sleeping predators. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Dalthine space, like ghosts materializing from a nightmare. Aaron was in the emergency command center when the alarms went off. They had different tones now. His people had learned to distinguish between the sound that meant another Kravath attack and the sound that meant something new and unknown had arrived. This was the second kind. Counselor, we're detecting massive energy signatures at the system's edge. Initial scan shows 38 capital ships and over 200 smaller vessels. Configuration unknown. Technology unknown. They're not Kravath. Aaron felt his heart skip. The beacon. Something had answered the beacon. Are they hostile? Unknown. They're maintaining a defensive formation and not approaching. Wait, we're receiving a transmission. Audio only. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything Aaron had heard before. It was translated by their computer into Dalthine. But even through the translation, he could hear something in it. Strength, certainty, purpose. This is Captain Dan Reed of the United Earth ship Valiant. We are responding to your distress signal. We are here to help. Please respond on this frequency if you can hear us. Earth. Aaron searched his memory and came up with nothing. Lysa, do we have any records of Earth or humans? Lysa was already searching the archives. Nothing in our current database. Let me check the ancient files. The ones from the old ones. Her fingers flew across the controls. Here, one reference. It's marked as Mythology section. Something about sleepers from the death world called Terra. Wait, Terra is just another name for Earth. The file says they were guardians who lived in the dark places between stars. That's all? That's all. The old ones apparently met them once and decided to mark their world as prohibited. Classification, Death World, Class 12, Class 12. Aaron had never heard of anything higher than Class 8. What does Class 12 mean? It means the planet is so dangerous that even thinking about visiting it is considered suicidal. Lisa looked pale. Counselor, we may have called for help from something worse than the Krevath. Aaron made a decision. They were dying anyway. Open a channel. Captain Reed, this is Counselor Aaron of the Dalthene Republic. We received your message. Are you truly here to help us? That's exactly why we're here. We picked up your distress signal 3 days ago and came as fast as we could. What's your situation? Aaron explained quickly. The Krevath invasion. The bombardment. The millions already dead. The fact that they had maybe hours before the final assault began. As he spoke, he watched his tactical display. The human ships weren't moving closer, but they were adjusting their formation, spreading out, preparing for something. Understood, Reed said when Aaron finished. We're going to help you. But I need you to understand something first. We're going to engage the Krevath. The fight will be violent. Our methods may seem harsh to you, but we will not allow them to harm any more civilians. Do we have your permission to act? Yes, please, do whatever you need to do. Thank you. One more thing. Keep your remaining ships away from the combat zone. We don't want any accidents. There was a pause. The Krevath are hailing us now. This should be interesting. Commander Drexen had been celebrating. His troops were ready to land. The last Dalthene resistance would be crushed within hours. Then the unknown fleet had appeared. Initially, he had been annoyed at the interruption. Now he was curious. Unknown vessels, this is Commander Drexen of the Krevath Dominion. You are interfering with a military operation. Identify yourselves and leave immediately. This is Captain Reed of the United Earth Fleet. We are responding to a distress call from the Dalthene Republic. You are committing acts of aggression against a peaceful species. Stand down and withdraw from this system. Drexen laughed. He couldn't help it. Earth? I've never heard of Earth. You must be some minor species who doesn't understand how power works in this galaxy. This system belongs to the Dominion now. Leave or you will be destroyed. I gave you a chance. Remember that. The transmission ended. Drexen was still smiling when he ordered 3 of his battle groups to destroy the unknown fleet. 30 ships total. More than enough to handle some newcomers who didn't know their place. The Krevath ships moved in on the human formation. They activated their plasma cannons, weapons that could melt through the armor of any known vessel. The targeting computers locked on. Drexen watched on his command screen, ready to enjoy the show. The humans fired first. Drexen's smile vanished as he watched the tactical display. The human ships weren't using energy weapons. They were using kinetic weapons, railguns that threw solid metal slugs at incredible speeds, missiles that carried high explosive warheads, weapons that the civilized galaxy had abandoned centuries ago as too primitive and too brutal. But they worked. A Krevath cruiser took 3 railgun hits to its forward section. The solid projectiles punched through the energy shields like they weren't even there. They tore through the armor plating and kept going, creating massive holes in the ship's structure. The cruiser broke apart, venting atmosphere and crew into space. Drexen watched in horror as his ships died. The human weapons were devastating at close range. One of his destroyers took a direct hit from what looked like a primitive explosive missile. The warhead detonated inside the ship's reactor room. The resulting explosion was bright enough to hurt Drexen's eyes through the screen. Return fire. All ships concentrate fire on their flagship. The Krevath ships obeyed. Plasma cannons fired in unison, creating a storm of superheated gas that should have vaporized anything in its path. The human flagship took the hit directly. Drexen leaned forward, expecting to see the ship break apart. It didn't. The human ship's outer armor glowed white-hot where the plasma had hit. Sections melted away, revealing secondary armor underneath. But the ship kept moving, kept firing. It tanked hits that should have destroyed it and acted like nothing had happened. What are those ships made of? Someone on Drexen's bridge whispered. The battle lasted 14 minutes. When it was over, 30 Krevath ships were gone. The humans had lost nothing. A few of their vessels showed damage, but they were all still operational. Dan watched the tactical display go quiet. The Kravath had stopped advancing. Good. Maybe they were learning. Captain, the Kravath commander is hailing us again. Put him through. Drexen's face appeared on the screen. He didn't look arrogant anymore. He looked shocked. What are you? We're humans. We're from a planet called Earth, and we don't like bullies. You use kinetic weapons, explosives. Your ships don't have proper shielding. You fight like barbarians. We fight like people who have something to protect. Now I'm going to ask you one more time. Stand down. Leave this system, or we will make you leave. I have 300 ships, and we destroyed 30 of them in less than 15 minutes. Do you really want to see what happens when we stop being polite? Dan leaned forward. Here's what you need to understand, Commander. On Earth, we have a saying, never corner something meaner than you. You cornered the Dalthine. That was your first mistake. Your second mistake was still being here when we arrived. Drexen's 4 eyes stared at Dan like he was seeing a monster. The galaxy will hear about this. Good, let them hear. Let them know that when someone calls for help, Earth answers. Now get out. The transmission ended. Dan watched as the Kravath fleet slowly began to pull back. Not all of them. Drexen wasn't retreating yet, but they were being cautious now. They had learned respect. Captain, his communication officer said, we're receiving a message from the Dalthine. Counselor Aaron wants to know what happens next. Dan looked at the planet below, still burning, still dying, but maybe not for much longer. Tell him we're just getting started. Colonel Ann Price watched the surface of the Dalthine homeworld through the window of her drop pod. She could see the cities below. Some were still intact. Others were ruins. The Kravath had landed occupation forces 2 days ago. They controlled about 40% of the planet's surface now. That was about to change. All units, this is Colonel Price. We're about to show these Kravath what happens when you invade someone's home. Remember your training. Remember why we're here. And remember that every civilian we save is a victory. The drop pods launched from the human carriers in waves. 2,000 Marines in the first wave. 5,000 more ready to follow. The pods were designed to look like missiles on Kravath sensors. By the time they figured out the difference, it would be too late. Anne felt the familiar pressure of atmospheric entry. Her pod shook and rattled. The heat shields glowed red. Then the retro rockets fired, and the pod slammed into the ground hard enough to crack concrete. The door blew open with explosive bolts, and Anne was moving before the smoke cleared. The Marines had landed in a city park. Kravath troops were everywhere. They had been using the park as a staging area. They weren't expecting an attack. Anne raised her rifle and started shooting. Humans had physical advantages that most species didn't understand until they saw them in action. Earth's high gravity meant that every human was stronger and faster on lower gravity worlds. Anne moved like lightning compared to the Kravath. She crossed the park in seconds, her rifle firing in controlled bursts. Each shot found its target. The Kravath tried to respond, but they were too slow. Anne's squad hit them from 3 sides at once. The Marines used tactics that the Kravath had never seen before. They didn't stand and trade fire like civilized soldiers. They used cover. They flanked. They moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. A Kravath officer tried to organize a defense. Anne put 2 rounds through his chest. He went down hard. The rest of his unit broke and ran. The Marines pursued. Command, this is Price. LZ is secure. Beginning sweep of the city. In orbit, Admiral Cross coordinated the assault. The Navy handled the space battle while the Marines dealt with the ground forces. It was a 2-pronged attack that the Kravath weren't equipped to handle. Drexen had committed everything to the surface invasion. His ships were outnumbered and outgunned in space. His ground troops were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought in ways they couldn't counter. Commander, we're receiving casualty reports from the surface. The human ground forces they're unstoppable. Drexen pulled up the combat footage. What he saw made his blood run cold. Human soldiers moving through urban terrain with perfect efficiency. They cleared buildings in minutes. They set ambushes that his troops walked into like blind animals, and they never stopped. One piece of footage showed a human Marine who had been shot 3 times. The human went down. Drexen watched, expecting the soldier to stay down. Instead, the human got back up. The armor had stopped 2 of the bullets. The 3rd had gone through the shoulder. The human simply bandaged it in the field and kept fighting. They don't stop. One of Drexen's officers whispered, "You shoot them and they keep coming." Anne and her squad reached a Dalthene hospital that the Krevath were using as a command post. There were civilians inside. Hostages. This required a more delicate approach. Okay, people, we go in quiet. No explosives. No heavy weapons. We get the civilians out first, then we deal with the Krevath. The Marines entered through the maintenance tunnels. They moved silently despite their armor and gear. Years of training in every environment imaginable. Earth had jungles and deserts and frozen tundras, and they had learned to fight in all of them. The Krevath guards never heard them coming. Anne's squad took them down with suppressed weapons and knife work. Quick, clean, professional. They cleared 3 floors before the Krevath even knew they were under attack. The civilians were in the basement. About 200 Dalthene, mostly women and children. They were terrified. Anne removed her helmet so they could see her face. We're here to help. We're going to get you out. Stay quiet and follow my people. A Dalthene child, maybe 6 years old by human standards, looked up at Anne with wide eyes. Are you the Guardians? From the old stories? Anne smiled. Something like that. Come on, let's get you somewhere safe. The evacuation took 20 minutes. The Marines got all 200 civilians out through the tunnels and into the custody of Dalthene emergency services. Then they went back for the Krevath. The Krevath commander in the hospital realized too late that he was trapped. The humans had sealed every exit. They had cut the communication lines, and now they were coming. Surrender and you will be treated according to the rules of war. Anne's voice echoed through the building's speakers. Resist and you will be eliminated. You have 2 minutes to decide. The Krevath chose to resist. It was a mistake. The Marines hit the command center from 4 directions at once. Flashbangs and smoke grenades created chaos. The Krevath fired blindly into the confusion. The humans used thermal imaging to see through the smoke. It was over in 90 seconds. Anne stood over the Krevath commander. He was wounded but alive. You're going to stand trial for what you did here. Every civilian death, every war crime. All of it. Humans don't follow the galactic rules of war, the commander spat. You're savages. No, we're just better at it than you are. There's a difference. Anne looked at her squad. Get him and the others to the detention area. Make sure the medics check them. We're not barbarians. The battle for the planet lasted 18 hours. By the end, the Krevath occupation force had been completely routed. Some surrendered. Some tried to flee to their ships and were intercepted by the Navy. Some fought to the end and died for it. In space, Admiral Cross received the casualty reports. 37 Marines wounded, 5 killed in action. The Krevath had lost over 10,000 ground troops and another 50 ships. Dan stood next to her on the bridge of the Valiant. The Ragnarok is in position, Helen nodded. The Ragnarok had been holding back, letting the regular fleet handle most of the fighting. But Drexen still had his main battle group intact. Over 100 heavy warships. He was pulling back, but he hadn't surrendered. Show him, Helen said quietly. The Ragnarok moved into position. It was massive, twice the size of any other ship in the fleet. Its main weapon was a spinal-mounted mass accelerator that ran the entire length of the ship. It was designed to throw a 10-ton projectile at a significant fraction of light speed. The targeting computer locked onto the Krevath formation. Helen gave the order. The Ragnarok fired. The projectile crossed the distance in seconds. It hit the lead Krevath dreadnought dead center. The kinetic energy was so massive that the ship simply disintegrated. But the projectile kept going. It punched through a second dreadnought, then a third, then a fourth, fifth, and sixth. 6 capital ships destroyed in one shot. Drexen watched it happen and felt something he hadn't felt in his entire military career. He felt fear. Real, genuine, bone-deep terror. All ships cease fire. Cease fire! He opened a channel to the humans. We surrender. Complete and unconditional surrender. Please, no more. Dan's face appeared on his screen. Power down your weapons. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with immediate destruction. Do you understand? Yes, we understand. Dan cut the transmission and turned to Helen. We won. Helen looked at the planet below. It was scarred and burned, but it was free. No, they won. We just helped. On the surface, Aaron walked through the streets of his capital city. Human Marines were everywhere, helping with rescue operations. He watched a squad dig through rubble to pull out survivors. He watched a medic treat a wounded Dalthene child with the same care she would show her own. Lissa found him in the wreckage. The beacon worked. The guardians from the old stories were real. They're not guardians, they're soldiers. Aaron watched another human marine, barely more than a boy himself, carry an elderly Dalthine to safety. But maybe that's what we needed. News traveled fast in the galaxy. Ambassador Thesson sat in the Galactic Council chambers and watched as the emergency session descended into chaos. Representatives from 200 species argued, shouted, and demanded answers. All because of what had happened in Dalthine space. The footage played on the central display for the third time. Human ships destroying a Krevath fleet. Human marines moving through cities like predators. The Ragnarok firing its impossible weapon and obliterating 6 capital ships in one shot. Every species in the chamber watched with different emotions. Some felt horror. Some felt fascination. A few felt hope. "This is exactly what we feared," Councillor Venn of the Peltharian Union said loudly. "The humans have demonstrated military capabilities that exceed all projections. They used weapons we classify as barbaric. They fought with tactics we consider unnecessarily violent. They are a threat to galactic stability. They saved millions of innocent lives," a smaller voice countered. It came from Councillor Mira of the Helion Federation. The Krevath were committing genocide. The Council did nothing. Earth answered a distress call and stopped a massacre. "How is that a threat?" "Because they're Deathworlders." Venn's voice rose. "Do you understand what that means? They evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill them. Their gravity is nearly twice standard. Their weather systems generate storms that could destroy our cities. They have predators that would terrify our warriors. They are built for violence in ways that we can barely comprehend." Thesson finally stood. "I warned Earth not to go. I told them that the galaxy would judge them for how they fight. But I was wrong about one thing. I thought they would be ruthless. I thought they would kill indiscriminately." He pulled up new footage. "Look at this." The screen showed a human marine carrying a Dalthine child out of a burning building. Another clip showed human medics treating wounded civilians before treating their own injured soldiers. A third showed human engineers helping to rebuild a destroyed hospital. "They fight like demons," Thesson continued, "but they protect like angels. Every report from Dalthine space says the same thing. The humans were violent when they needed to be and gentle when they could afford to be. They followed the rules of war even when their enemy didn't. They treated prisoners according to galactic law. They prioritized civilian safety over military efficiency." He paused. "Perhaps we were wrong to fear them so much." Venn wasn't convinced. One act of heroism doesn't erase 2 centuries of concern. "Then let's discuss the other issue," another counselor said. This was from the Avish Collective, a species known for their merchant fleets. Earth has been in quarantine for 200 years. They've developed technology in isolation. According to the intelligence reports, their weapons are decades ahead of galactic standards in some areas. Their ships are more durable. Their soldiers are more effective. If we continue to keep them isolated, they will only grow stronger, and we will grow more afraid. Are you suggesting we lift the quarantine? I'm suggesting we consider it. Because the alternative is having a powerful military species that feels persecuted and isolated. That's more dangerous than having them as allies. The argument continued. Thesson sat down and watched. The council would debate for days, maybe weeks, but the decision was already made. Everyone knew it. Earth had proven they couldn't be contained. The only question was whether the galaxy would accept them or try to oppose them. On the other side of the galaxy, in the throne room of the Krevath Dominion, Emperor Vorath reviewed the combat data from Dalthine space. Vorath was old for a Krevath. He had lived through 3 wars and won 2 of them. He understood power, and he understood when he was facing something he couldn't beat. The data from Drexen's fleet was clear. The humans were superior in almost every measurable way. "How many ships did we lose?" Vorath asked his war council. 147 capital ships, approximately 300 support vessels, over 15,000 ground troops dead or captured. And the humans? 5 killed in ground combat, 37 wounded. They lost no ships. Several were damaged, but all remained operational. Vorath closed his eyes. "Send a diplomatic envoy to Earth. Inform them that the Dominion wishes to discuss terms." "Terms, my Emperor?" "Peace terms. Surrender terms. Whatever they want to call it. We're not going to fight them. We can't win." His advisors looked shocked. "The Krevath Dominion didn't surrender. They conquered." But Vorath had survived this long by knowing when to retreat. My Emperor, our honor means nothing if we're all dead. I watched the footage. I saw what their weapons can do. If we fight them, they will come to our homeworld and they will destroy us. We made a mistake attacking the Dalthine. We're going to correct that mistake before it costs us everything. The meeting with human diplomats happened 3 days later on a neutral station. Vorath sent his best negotiators. They expected the usual galactic diplomacy, minor concessions, some territory exchanged, maybe a small tribute paid. Captain Dan Reed led the human delegation. He sat across from the Krivath negotiators and didn't waste time with pleasantries. These are our terms. Full withdrawal from all Dalthine territory, reparations paid to cover reconstruction costs, war crime trials for any Krivath officers who violated galactic law, and a formal apology to the Dalthine people. The lead Krivath negotiator blinked in surprise. Those terms are excessive. Those terms are generous. Your forces committed genocide. Under galactic law, we could demand far more. The Council will never support such harsh terms. The Council had their chance to stop you. They did nothing. We stopped you. So the Council's opinion doesn't matter much to us right now? Dan leaned forward. Here's what you need to understand. Earth doesn't want your territory. We don't want to conquer you. We just want you to stop hurting innocent people. Accept these terms or we'll come to your homeworld and enforce them. The negotiator went pale. You would invade our homeworld? Only if you make us. We'd prefer peace, but we're willing to fight if that's what it takes. The Krivath agreed to everything. Vorath had given them permission to accept any terms that avoided continued war. The humans were too dangerous to fight. News of the agreement spread through the galaxy within hours. The Krivath Dominion, one of the most powerful military forces in known space, had surrendered to a species that most of the galaxy had never heard of until a week ago. The Galactic Council convened again. This time the vote was quick. They formally lifted Earth's quarantine status. They had no choice. Keeping humanity isolated had become impossible and counterproductive. Thesson delivered the news to Admiral Cross personally. She was still in Dalthine space overseeing the reconstruction efforts. So we're allowed to travel freely now? Helen asked. Yes, you have full access to Council space. You can establish trade agreements, join diplomatic missions, participate in Council activities. Thesson paused. But you should know that most species are still frightened of you. Because we're good at fighting? Because you're good at everything you need to be good at. Fighting, protecting, building. You're adaptable in ways most species aren't. You survived on a death world that should have killed you. Instead, it made you stronger. Thesson looked at the reconstruction happening below them. Human engineers working alongside Dalthine workers. The galaxy has never seen anything like humanity before. Some species will hate you for it. Others will admire you. But none of us will ever forget what happened here. Helen watched the planet below, slowly healing, slowly coming back to life. We didn't do this to scare anyone. We did it because it was right, I know. That's what frightens them most. You're not conquerors. You're not merchants looking for profit. You're idealists with the power to enforce your ideals. The galaxy doesn't know how to handle that. They'll figure it out, or they won't. Either way, we're here now. And when someone calls for help, we're going to answer. Thesson flew back to Council headquarters. He filed his report and recommended that humanity be given full membership status. It passed by a narrow margin. But even as the Council voted, messages were arriving at Earth from dozens of smaller species. Trade requests, defense treaties, diplomatic exchanges. Species that had been ignored or bullied by the larger powers wanted Earth's protection. Humanity's reputation had changed in a week. They were no longer the frightening unknowns from a quarantined world. They were the ones who answered the call. The ones who stood between the weak and the strong. Admiral Cross read through the requests and smiled. This was going to change everything. 6 months had changed everything. Aaron walked through the reconstructed streets of his capital city and marveled at how much had been rebuilt. Human engineers had shared their technology freely. Buildings that would have taken years to repair were standing again in months. The scars of war were still visible, but they were healing. Today he had been invited to visit one of the human warships. The UES Valiant, Captain Reed's flagship. Lissa accompanied him, as curious about human technology as she was about everything else. The shuttle docked with the Valiant and Aaron stepped into a world he barely understood. The ship was massive inside with corridors that seemed to go on forever. Everything was functional and efficient. There were no decorations, no artwork. Just clean metal and purpose. Dan met them at the airlock. "Counselor Aaron, welcome aboard. We're honored to have you." "The honor is ours, Captain. You saved our people. We owe you everything." Dan looked uncomfortable with the praise. "We just did what anyone should do. Come on, I'll give you a tour." They walked through the ship. Aaron saw the crew working at their stations. Humans moved with that characteristic speed and efficiency that came from living in higher gravity. They were always in motion, always busy. It was almost exhausting to watch. Lisa couldn't stop asking questions. "How does your artificial gravity work? What powers your reactors? How do you shield against radiation?" Dan answered each question patiently. Some of the technology was impressive. Some of it was terrifyingly simple. The humans had solved problems that the galaxy considered impossible by just refusing to believe they were impossible. They reached the observation deck. Through the massive windows, Aaron could see his homeworld spinning peacefully below. It looked almost normal from up here. The burn scars were fading. Life was returning. "Why did you come?" Aaron asked suddenly. "You owe us nothing. Your people didn't know we existed until you heard our distress call. Why risk your lives for strangers?" Dan was quiet for a moment. "Do you know what it's like to be alone? To be isolated because everyone is afraid of you?" "No. Earth was quarantined for 200 years. The galaxy decided we were too dangerous to interact with. We built our fleets and trained our soldiers, but we had no one to protect except ourselves. When we heard your call, we heard someone who needed help that no one else was willing to give. We remembered what it felt like to be abandoned." Dan looked at Aaron. "We came because someone should. Because when you're scared and alone and dying, it shouldn't matter if you're human or Dalthine or any other species. If you need help, someone should answer." Lissa wiped her eyes. "The old stories were right. You are guardians. We're just people trying to do the right thing." They spent another hour on the ship. Dan showed them the medical bay where human doctors had developed new treatments for Dalthine injuries. He showed them the engineering section where humans and Dalthine were working together on hybrid technology. He showed them the memorial wall where the names of the 5 Marines who had died were engraved. "We remember everyone we lose," Dan said quietly. "Every single one." When it was time to leave, Aaron and Lissa took the shuttle back to the planet. On the way down, Lissa looked at her datapad. "The human government has proposed a mutual defense treaty, full military alliance, technology sharing, cultural exchange programs. What do you think we should do?" "I think we should sign it immediately. The humans are the best friends we could ever hope for," Aaron agreed. The treaty signing happened a week later. It was the first formal alliance between Earth and another species. President Garcia attended personally. So did Admiral Cross and Captain Reed. The ceremony was broadcast across both worlds. "Today we forge a friendship born in fire," President Garcia said. "The Dalthine called for help and we answered. Now we pledge to stand together, to defend each other, to build a better future together." Aaron signed the treaty with hands that only shook a little. Lissa stood next to him representing the scientific community. When it was done, the crowd erupted in cheers. Dalthine and humans together, celebrating not just survival but hope. The treaty had immediate effects. Within days, other species reached out to Earth. The small traders of the Helion Federation, the peaceful farmers of the Avish Collective, the mining colonies of the Outer Rim. All of them had stories of being bullied or ignored by the larger powers. All of them wanted what the Dalthine had: protection and partnership with Earth. Admiral Cross found herself commanding a new kind of fleet. The Terran Defense Initiative, they called it. It included human ships alongside vessels from a dozen different species. They trained together. They patrolled together. They became a symbol of something new in the galaxy. A coalition based not on fear or profit, but on the simple idea that the strong should protect the weak. The Galactic Council watched this development with mixed feelings. Some members appreciated the stability the Terran Defense Initiative brought. Others worried about Earth's growing influence. But no one could deny the results. Piracy dropped. Border disputes decreased. Species that had been fighting for decades suddenly found neutral human mediators helping them negotiate peace. Thesson visited Earth for the first time since the quarantine had been lifted. He toured the planet that had terrified the galaxy for so long. He saw the cities that humans had built despite the harsh environment. He saw the mountains and oceans that made most galactic species uncomfortable just to look at. He saw a world that had tried to kill its inhabitants and failed. President Garcia met with him in a garden that would have been impossible on most worlds. The gravity was crushing by galactic standards. The weather was unpredictable, but it was beautiful. "Are you satisfied that we're not monsters?" Garcia asked with a slight smile. "I was never certain you were monsters. I was just afraid of what you could do if you chose to be." Thesson looked at the Earth sky, so blue and violent. "I understand now why you fight the way you do. This world taught you that survival requires strength, but it also taught you that survival alone isn't enough. You need community, purpose, something worth protecting. We're not perfect. We've made mistakes. We'll probably make more, but you try. That's what matters. You see injustice and you act. You see suffering and you help. The galaxy has needed that for a long time." They walked through the garden in comfortable silence. Thesson filed his final report that evening. His recommendation was simple: embrace humanity fully. They had earned their place in the galactic community. Far away on a monitoring station in deep space, an alarm began to sound. Another distress beacon had activated. This one from a species called the Thanari. They were under attack by raiders. Their defenses were failing. They were calling for help. Admiral Cross received the alert at her desk. She was reviewing fleet deployment schedules when the message came through. She read it twice, then pulled up the star charts. The Thanari system was 3 weeks away at maximum speed. She sent the orders without hesitation. "All available ships prepare for immediate deployment. We have a situation." Within hours, the Terran Defense Initiative was moving. Human ships formed the core of the fleet, but they were joined by Dalthene cruisers, Avish support vessels, and Helion scouts. A coalition fleet representing a dozen species, all moving together with one purpose. Dan stood on the bridge of the Valiant and watched the fleet assemble. It was bigger than the force that had saved the Dalthene, more diverse, more capable, and it carried a message that was spreading through the galaxy. If you needed help, someone would answer. President Garcia addressed the fleet before they departed. Her message was broadcast to every ship, every crew member, every species represented. "We go not as conquerors, but as defenders. We go not for glory, but because it's right. We go because someone is calling for help, and we will not let them face the darkness alone. This is who we are now. This is who we choose to be. Earth and our allies together, standing for those who cannot stand for themselves." The fleet entered faster than light travel. Behind them, Earth continued its slow orbit around the sun, a blue marble that had once been isolated and feared, now becoming the heart of something new. Aaron watched the departure from his office. Lysa stood next to him, monitoring the sensors. "They're really going to do this every time, aren't they?" Lysa asked. "Every distress call? Every species in danger?" "Yes, because that's who they are. The galaxy is going to change because of this. It already has. In the darkness between stars, the human fleet traveled toward another world in need. They carried weapons and technology, yes, but more than that, they carried hope. The hope that when you were at your worst, when everything seemed lost, when the darkness closed in, someone would come, because on a small blue world called Earth, a species that had been shaped by violence and hardship had learned one simple truth. The strongest thing you could be wasn't a conqueror. It was a protector. And humanity, the Death Worlders from the Nightmare Planet, had finally found their purpose. They were the ones who answered the call, and the galaxy would never be the same.